Okay, we'll be going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, this is just incredible, and I'm back after that short intermission break. And on the phone, I have Dr. Jay Lay with me. He's a clinical psychologist, practices out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he oversees a large mental health clinic. Dr. Lay has been a guest on Anderson Cooper Show, Dr. Phil Show, as other numerous radio shows, has also written for the London Telegraph, the New York Post. The reason we have actually Dr. Lay on the show is his new controversial book. Uh, it's called The Myths of Sex Addiction, and we're going to get down and ask some questions about his book as well as sex addiction all the way around. Also, Dr. Lay has been referred to in Playboy magazine and newspapers and magazines all around the world. He not only authored The Myth of Sex Addiction in 2012, but he also has a book entitled The Insatiable Wives and Women Who Stray and the Men Who Love Them. That was published in 2009. Dr. Lay, are you on the phone, sir?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with us here on Adult Play Parlor Radio. We have guests that, believe it or not, enjoy sex and are worried about being labeled a sex addict. So you were kind of the perfect pick for our show there, and we appreciate the time that you're spending with us today.
That's great. I appreciate it. I'm always happy to come on and talk with people about sex addiction, about those people out there that like sex and are afraid that they might like sex too much. It's a
Right.
message that we give in our society that if you like sex too much, there's something wrong with you. But it's an unfortunate message because sex is very, very healthy.
Yes, yes, sex is a healthy activity. And I mean, adultplayparlor.com is founded on wanting people to expand their sexuality and grow sexually with the use of toys and aids, of course, but also enhancing maybe some of your sexual encounters with some DVDs and some, as the public calls it, porn.
Hmm.
So we encourage this because our feeling is that these things aren't harmful, but the public would lead us to believe otherwise. The media would lead us to be otherwise. Give me a brief synopsis of what your book's about, and then we'll get down to the questions.
Sure. So, y- sex addiction, you almost can't turn on the news or read the paper without running across this concept. Whenever some famous man gets in trouble, he's labeled a sex addict just because he was putting his penis somewhere he shouldn't have been. People found out and made it a big stink. The thing is that I'm a formally trained clinical psychologist, and when I started digging into this, I was surprised by how much people believed that this was true because psychiatry, psychology don't accept sex addiction as real. It is a pop phenomenon. It's one that the media has made real, but science doesn't treat it as real. But there are lots of folks out there that make lots of money from telling people that they should be afraid of sex. And so there are lots of books out there written by these people that you can buy that will tell you you're a sex addict, your husband is a sex addict, your boss is a sex addict, and you better watch out because your dog and your cat might turn into sex addicts.
Right.
But there's not a single book out there that really explains the fact that sex is something healthy, like I said, and that the messages coming from these people are based on fear and not based on science. So I decided to write one, and I've had a lot of fun. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed is that as I've been out there talking about it, as people are reading my book, it is fostering more dialogue where people are starting to talk about what is sex? Is sex healthy? What is the idea of too much sex mean? How do we define that? And how do we accept that different people like sex in different amounts in different ways, and that's healthy? How can we accept that and embrace that as a society and in medicine and psychology?
Yes, yes. Well, and to stay on the note with that, we're in a sex industry. Is what we're in. So I mean that's
Sure.
why this really hit home with us. Because we've heard this thrown around everywhere. Um, I can tell you I've been to church events, things like that, where they throw it out. If you watch porn, you are addicted to it, and the demon has got you, and you need to seek counseling and help, and this and that. But what your book is stating is there's no scientific basis for this.
No, there really isn't, and this is based on morality. This is based on the idea that somebody can look at you and say whether you're having too much sex or the sex that you're having is unhealthy. But we don't know enough about what kinds of sex people are out there are having to be able to say what is normal. And as a result, we end up with subjective impressions. What that means is that most therapists out there, most clinicians, they're going to decide whether your sex is unhealthy by questioning themselves. They're going to say, well, would I do that? Would I get turned on by that? And if the answer to that is no for that therapist, then they're going to decide you're a sex addict. The famous researcher Kinsey, back in the 1940s, he said the definition of an nymphomaniac is anybody who has more sex than the therapist. We're really still there. This is all just based on morality and a fear of sex. The sex industry, I think, is particularly susceptible to this because the sex addiction industry is driven by religious and moral groups. Planned Parenthood was just a couple of weeks ago challenged by a moral group who accused Planned Parenthood of being drug pushers, and that the drug of choice that Planned Parenthood was pushing was masturbation, that they were trying to create sex addiction in people, and that was evil. That's morality. It's not medicine. It's not science. But they've grabbed onto this concept of sex addiction. They're trying to treat it like it's a disease. But
Yes.
really, what it is they have moral problems with you having sex, and they want to stop you from having sex. And God help you if you like having sex, because that means there's something wrong.
Well, or if you have some kind of what would be considered morally off sex, such as kinky sex,
Right.
BDSM, things of that nature. I mean, the second they find out you're into BDSM or any kind of what I would call a kink fetish,
Hmm.
such as foot worship, things like that, you're instantly labeled a deviant or sex addict.
And the reality is, again, the internet has taught us some amazing things
Hmm.
about sex that we never knew. Because through the internet, through access to porn on the internet, access to sex toys and chats and everything else like that, we're now finding out that there are a lot of kinky people out there with lots of different kinds of kinks. And so for many years, if you were interested in feet, if you were interested in, having somebody stand on top of you and stomp you, most people who thought that or were into that thought they were the only one. And now the internet is letting them know that not only are they not the only one, but there are millions of other people out there who like the same thing. So
Well, and we
at
can,
this point, I don't know what normal sex is. I don't
yeah.
think anybody does. I think normal sex, frankly, is getting pretty kinky.
Yeah, the norm is no longer missionary position. When we look at marketing and things like that in the adult industry, basically it's left open to what fetish are you into.
Hmm. And what fetish
That's
are
the
you
way we
into
have to look at it.
right now? What fetish are you into right now? And then, to quote Dan Savage, what fetish would you be willing to play with if your partner was into it?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's become a big, broad, wide open kind of world, and frankly, I think that's healthy
Right.
because I think we're creating an environment through the internet where somebody who likes sex or somebody who is into different kinds of sex is not going to be stigmatized and is not going to be excluded. But right now we're in this last gasp of these groups that are afraid. They have been afraid for a long time. For hundreds of years, people have been trying to control sex and trying to prevent other people from having too much sex. Back in the 1500s, women who masturbated were burned at the stake
Oh
because it
yeah.
was believed that masturbation was the way that the devil got into your soul.
Hmm.
Well, now, and it's interesting because you used the word demonized a moment ago.
Yes.
the folks who are against sex addiction, they are treating it like it's a morality fight, like they are fighting evil. They equate sex and kinky sex with evil. And
Yes.
again, if we want to let them be a morality group and they're out there petitioning Planned Parenthood or whatever, that's fine, go to it. But don't use science and don't use medicine, and
Yes.
don't, for God's sake, use this pseudo kind of addiction language where people go on TV then and say, "Oh, well, the reason that person did that awful thing, whether it was cheating or lying or hurting somebody else, was because they were a sex addict." And that's another big problem I have, is that as much as they are trying to control people's sexuality, they are also putting out a message that sex is too powerful for anybody else to control.
Oh, you
And
can't control it. It's,
right.
that's what we hear everywhere. Oh, you need to control this or control that. It is about control when it comes down to it. And we've thought this way for many, many years. And your book brought some facts to light. Um, we looked at this control issue. Every time something's being controlled, somebody's making money, lots and lots of
Uh-huh.
money. Who is making the money off of this fear and control of sex addiction?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I really believe in follow the money. If you want to know why something is sticking around, follow the money. And there's a bunch of money in sex addiction. Now, one group that is making money are the folks who are providing this treatment. Now, it's important to know that because sex addiction is not an accepted diagnosis, your insurance companies won't pay for it. The folks who are providing these treatments, they charge lots of money, up to $1,000 a day for some of these high-end facilities, cash on the barrel, because remember, no insurance. The treatments that they're providing are not scientifically proven treatments. They basically are 12-step treatments that they charge a whole lot of money for, and where you come in and they're going to tell you all the things that are wrong with you and why everything that's wrong with you is the result of sex.
Yes.
These people are making tons of money, and they really don't want to admit it. Now, other folks in the sex addiction industry, there's all this kind of cottage industry around it, with people who are doing trainings for sex addiction, treatment providers, certification for treatment of sex addiction, and it's basically all snake oil. It is basically all a scam to make the American public think that this is real and powerful, and that people desperately need this treatment. But
Yes.
there's absolutely no evidence that the people out there who are hurting and need help can't get help from any other regular therapist or psychologist. They don't need special sex addiction treatment. They might need support, but they don't need sex addiction treatment. The other group that is out there that is making lots of money are these morality groups that I talked about. There is one group called Every Man's Battle, and they're a religious-based organization. They make $9 million a year by sending out materials that teach men and soldiers especially how to overcome the lure of pornography and their sex addiction. Now, it's interesting, again, they're using the language every man's battle because they're treating this like it's a war,
Yeah.
like it's a war on sin, it's a war against evil. They make
Well,
tons of money off of this.
I can't disagree. You realize a lot of people may know or may not know this, but I come from a very strict religious background, and I won't mention the denomination because honestly, I don't want to give them the time of day. But um, we used to have youth groups on Saturday and then the adult church on Sunday. On Sunday, I can remember several occasions where the Saturday when you'd go in to pick up your kids or something, they'd have a little adult service Saturday night while you're waiting on your kids. And they would vilify sex. They would demonize sex. You were wrong if you masturbate in your marriage. If you listen to or read sexually explicit things, if you listen to certain kinds of music, if you own Playboy, well, let's bring them into the Sunday night campfire. That's
Hmm.
how it still is here. And this church still practices that today. They will have people bring in their movies, their magazines, their books, and burn them on an open pit and demonize you and forgive you at the end.
Hmm. Because again, they're treating sex as sinful, treating
Mm-hmm.
sex as something that is certainly too much of it, and if you like it too much, is immoral and evil. Again, in Europe in the Middle Ages, they were so afraid of sex that they had special shirts made for men and women that covered the whole body, and they had a little hole, and that
Yes.
was the only way that it was safe to have sex. Now, you definitely weren't supposed to have sex in doggy style, and it wasn't because it was animalistic, but it was because the people who were afraid of sex said doggy style sex felt too good, and so people shouldn't do it. That it would lead them to get carried away.
Yes.
So all we're seeing today is the same thing. The other group, there are a couple of other groups I think that are making money, and one of them I think is a really dangerous one, and that's the media. The
Mm-hmm.
media have taken sex addiction and they've turned it into a mix of a fear concept and entertainment concept. They've got reality shows about sex addiction where they are just making a big hype out of it.
Yes.
Dr. Drew and Celebrity Rehab, all of this. It's just entertainment, and it's just a way to get people watching because they think, ooh, sex is titillating and taboo, but too much of it is scary and fearful. The other
Yes.
thing that media is doing with it, though, is that they're using that fear. And so they put out this idea, that, again, that sex might be dangerous, sex might be too much for you or your partner, and you better watch. News at 11, this man is a sex addict. Could your husband be a sex addict too?
Yeah,
And so,
and
again,
I've seen
they're
those headlines
feeding
come
off that.
over. I've
That's
seen
right.
those
They're
headlines
feeding
come
off
over.
that fear.
Yeah,
And
feeding it.
then in this and then in this incestuous circle, they bring these sex addict professionals and therapists on TV to talk about sex addiction as though it's real. And then those sex addiction therapists, all the people who are watching the show, get afraid and they go to the sex addiction therapist. So both the media are making money, the therapists are making money. They're selling these books and they're selling this idea, and they're just selling and feeding off of the fear of sex. But the thing is, sex is not something to be afraid of. Sex is normal and sex is healthy. Even your listeners who like all of us have had the experience of feeling out of control around our sex. When I was a kid and I masturbated, I thought masturbation was dangerous and maybe something that was wrong,
You will
and so
go
I tried to
blind.
stop. Oh, yeah, which funnily enough is a great story. The guy who came up with that concept was a guy named Benjamin Rush. He actually was a physician who signed the Declaration of Independence. He believed that that too much sex and masturbation especially would make you go blind, and he believed the appropriate treatment for it was using leeches. Now the reality
Oh,
is that what he was seeing was really the effects of sexually transmitted diseases, things like gonorrhea and syphilis, that actually do affect your vision. But it's not masturbation or sex that does it, it's the bacteria. So, but the folks who are pushing sex addiction, it's very funny because they cite Benjamin Rush, 300-year ago physician who believed in leeches. They cite him as a grandfather of their philosophy and theory, showing that this thing has been around for a long time. What they're really showing is how ludicrous this idea is.
yes. Because well, and like I said, how many of them, if they got caught with their hands in their pants, would apply leeches? Very few. You know.
Yeah, but what they would do? What they would do is they would go on TV and they would very shamefacedly say, "Oh, I'm a sex addict.
Oh,
Sex,
hang my
the
head.
sex was just too powerful. Porn and these porn actresses and strippers and these prostitutes. I couldn't control my sexuality. I need to go into treatment so
Yes.
that I never let sex control me again." But your sex drive is part of you. It is a beautiful and a wonderful part of you. And sometimes we make bad decisions about sex. That's part of life. When a person is turned on, they did this wonderful study where they had men looking at pornography and masturbating, and it was a research laptop. I mean, what great research to do! I'd love to do this
Yeah,
research.
that'd
You know,
be
you
some
wrap
great
up the
research.
yeah, yeah, you wrap up the laptop in Saran wrap so it doesn't get stuff all over it. You have these men masturbate and watch the video, but then they had them answer questions during the while they were watching the video, and they found what any of us would know is that when a man is turned on, and this goes for women too, when you're turned on and masturbating and having sex, you are more likely to do things and agree to things like being spanked or like having unprotected sex. You're more likely to agree to that than you would when you're not turned on. Well, duh. That's natural. It's normal. It's
It's
part of us.
called,
It's something we need. Yeah.
it's the chemicals in your brain.
Yeah, and it's beer goggles, it's love goggles, it's wanting to get laid and being horny, and again, that is natural. It's part of the way we're made. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're sick or ill. Now, yes, we can make bad decisions that we regret. There are people in relationships out there that get in trouble because of bad sexual decisions, and I think those people need help. But again, the problem is the bad decision. The problem is not the sex. The problem is not the porn.
Give
The
me
problem is the
an
decisions
example
around the
of
relationship.
give me an example of that bad decision.
Okay, well, the example that I hear a lot, and I'm sure your listeners will identify with this, is the story of these men out there who lose their jobs and their marriages because they are masturbating to internet porn constantly and they can't stop. And they're masturbating to internet porn 3, 4 hours a day. Oh my God help us. Their kids might see porn on the internet or walk in and see their dad masturbating. The wife is all upset because she's saying, "Oh, he's choosing porn over me." Maybe the husband even gets in trouble at work because he looks at porn at work. This sounds scary, and this is a story that everybody puts out to me over and over and over again as, look, see, porn is addictive. Well, but the problem there is not the porn. The problem is the decisions this man is making. He's putting, his personal sexual pleasure, he's putting the excitement that he gets out of watching porn over his family, over his relationship, over his job, etc. Now, that is a hard decision to make, but if and let's accept that when he's sitting there in front of the computer, it would be really difficult, almost impossible for him to stop masturbating and turn the computer off. Okay, what about when he's paying the internet bill every
Yeah.
month? Can he turn the internet off to control it? Can he put the computer out in the living room? Can he give his wife control of the computer passwords, etc., so that he can be in charge? But it's not easy to be in charge. And Sam Brownback, he is currently, funnily enough, the governor of Kansas. He used to be a senator, and he has a big problem with porn. I'm not
A
saying the
huge
man has a
problem with
problem
porn.
with. Yeah, he's probably one of your biggest customers. No,
Yeah.
but he's petitioned to try and restrain and constrain porn access, for a long time, especially in hotels. And he tells us one story that he thinks says one thing, and I think it says another. He tells a story about all the various men he knows that when they check into a hotel, they have to tell the front desk to turn off the TV cable access because they don't want to have that temptation of accessing the hotel porn in the room. Now, Sam Brownback puts that forth as, look how evil porn is, that these men have to go to that extreme to prevent porn taking over their lives.
No, that's
I look at that as
that.
I look at that as a positive example of these men making a positive step to be in control of their life. If they don't want to watch porn, okay, great. Here's how they can do it. But again, the problem and the decision is in the man, not in the porn, not in the
Yes.
sex.
Yes. Well, and my thought on that is, it's it's awfully hard to explain to your constituents why there's a credit card charge for adult movies on your government account. It is one reason those guys go in and ask to have that channel turned off.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things though that, and again, thinking about your industry, not too long ago, there was a fear that vibrators were addictive for women, and that women who used vibrators too much would lose the ability to have an orgasm during normal sex because a vibrator was just too powerful. A vibrator was just too good at stimulating a woman, and so that she wouldn't want normal sex anymore.
Now
It has
here's a
not.
fact on that.
Yeah,
You brought it up, so I've
yeah.
talked to a lot of porn stars, a lot, and one of our big questions from fans is, does a vibrator desensitize my wife to me? You know,
Ah,
and after talking to all these porn stars, and the favorite toy of choice by porn stars is called the Hitachi, which it's an extreme vibrator. This thing causes multiple orgasms, squirting orgasm. Just a great product for women. But the men who buy these toys for their wives always are asking, are they going to still want me afterwards? And after many discussions with these adult stars, they say, I prefer sex. Yeah, the masturbation's great,
hmm.
but what I really want after I get to a certain point is my man's penis inside of me.
Yeah,
You
they
know,
want the connection, they want the touch, but sometimes, sometimes masturbation feels good. Sometimes it is relaxing and soothing to just masturbate and not have to worry about another person, satisfying another person. You get to just sort of fill yourself up with yourself and relax and enjoy your own body. But that's something that folks like Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous call unhealthy. They say that masturbation is addictive. You know, just like the idea that vibrators are causing women to not want their husbands anymore, and it ain't true. You're
it's
absolutely
not.
right. Now the idea is, well, men who watch too much porn are becoming impotent. They're unable to get an erection with a normal woman. They can only get an erection watching pornography. It's funny because I went to school in the South. I went to school at University of Mississippi in Oxford, Mississippi, and I remember during my freshman year, this minister came in and he gave this talk to the whole college, thousands of kids in there, and he talked about how he had treated this woman or this man, this couple, where the man could only get an erection if there was an open Playboy magazine laying next to his wife as he had sex with her. The story has not
Really.
changed. Now it's internet porn. That was 20. God, I'm old. That was over 20 years ago that was happening, and now they're saying the same thing about internet porn. It ain't true. It ain't happening. Now, internet porn is very good at triggering the mechanisms of male sexuality. Internet porn, I think it's a fascinating example, again, of economics. The free market economy has led the internet porn industry to become very, very good at putting things out there that sell, because the more something attracts male attention, the more hits it gets, and so they put more of it out there. Well,
Yes.
now there is lots of porn out there that and the number one porn on the internet is multiple men and a single woman.
Yes.
And that's interesting because the number one fantasy of men is multiple women and a single man. So you would think that there would be a lot more porn of, threesomes with two women and a man. But in fact, there's more porn of multiple men, two men, three men, whatever, with a single woman. Why?
Now,
Because research. Go ahead.
yes, I was just
Yeah.
getting ready to
Because,
say we've done the research on this as well. Go ahead.
yeah. What do you find? So the research shows actually they've had men masturbate to different kinds of porn, and when a man watches porn that has multiple men and a single woman, he ejaculates harder. His ejaculate contains more sperm, and he gets harder again faster. Now, why is that? We think it's because in our evolutionary history, when another man was around, a man had to get hard again faster. His ejaculate had to contain more sperm in order to compete for reproduction. Throughout history,
Competitive
only
drive.
That's right. Throughout history, only 40% of men have reproduced, compared to 80% of women. So, 80% of the women throughout history of the world have had children. Only 40% of the men throughout the history of the world have had children. So, what that means is, in order for a man to have children and reproduce and pass his genes on, he had to fight for it. He had to compete. Internet porn today triggers that. It triggers those mechanisms. And so it feels very good. It is very powerful. It is very effective. But that's part of the free market economy. It's part of psychology. It's part of normal male sexuality. It's not part of a disease process. And the problem is not in the porn. The problem is not in the sex. It's not even a problem. It is just part of the way we're made.
Yes, yes.
Now, you said you've done research on this. What did you find?
We
I'm
found the
curious.
exact same thing. That went along with the psychological research, because in the sex industry we want to provide what the customer wants before they ask. So we have these sit down groups. We talk to men, and what we found was just that. You'd give men a 30-minute video of two girls and one guy, exactly what they listened for. We were watching eyes, is what we did, is we put a
Yeah.
camera up and watched their eyes, and if their eyes were actively tracking, if they were stimulated, we had blood pressure, pulse, the whole nine.
Hmm.
We didn't have them actually masturbate to it. What we wanted was a cool sit down, just watch it, let us see what you're interested in. And then
Hmm.
we did the two guys and one girl, and the one thing we noticed is pupil size changed almost instantly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And we also
Now
started
here.
noticing in the face that they would actually flare their nostrils.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
taking in
Yeah.
more input.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, here's some interesting things again about response to porn. Men actually, when men watch porn, they watch the woman's face more
Hmm.
than they look at her genitals. You wouldn't believe it, but they watch the face. When women watch porn, they look at the genitals more than the faces. It's very interesting, and it's counterintuitive. Here's another thing: men have less of a response to porn than women do.
Yes.
Women are more likely to become physically aroused to all kinds of porn, whereas men are more likely to only get physically aroused to certain kinds of porn. So if they're straight, they're really only going to get turned on to straight porn. If they're gay, they're really only going to get turned on to gay porn. But women will get turned on to any kind of porn. So the idea that men are getting addicted to porn, frankly, is just ludicrous, because if anybody's going to get addicted to porn, it should be women, and it's not happening.
Yeah, we're not seeing a whole rush of women. Every time I turn on the TV, and we'll mention a famous golfer, uh, who's been recently diagnosed because he was caught with his pants down with somebody else and then crashed an SUV.
Hmm.
And like I said, I don't have to mention him by name. I mean, pretty much everybody's already figured it out. But it's Tiger Woods. He got pretty spanked on public television, did he not?
Yeah, and I think it's just silly when these famous men get in trouble for this kind of sexuality, because famous, powerful men for thousands of years have been having sex with lots and lots of women. David
Yes.
and Solomon in the Bible had hundreds and thousands of wives, and for David, even the many wives he had wasn't enough. He coveted Bathsheba and killed her husband so he could have her. Was he addicted to sex? No.
No.
He was powerful. He enjoyed the privileges of power, and one of those privileges of power is sex. But nowadays, men who enact that privilege of power and pursue sex with multiple women are called sex addicts. They
Hmm.
are called evil. They're called unethical. They're just doing what men throughout history have done when they could. Why do men become rock stars? Not for the music, baby, but for the food.
I think they best put it sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And you
Yeah.
notice sex leads it.
Uh-huh.
You know,
So,
that's why you get into music. Now,
yeah.
you brought up an interesting point. About the men and women. side of the coins.
Hmm.
People ask me all the time, how do you sit there and review adult videos all day long? Because that's part of my job title. I review every adult product that's on our website.
Wow.
And does that make you feel different? Does it make you more horny? And I'm like, it's just like a normal job. I pop in a tape, watch it for its movie content, because I mean, what turns me on is, sitting there watching it with my wife at home, getting a little bit hot and heavy.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily the film itself.
Hmm.
And where I can take the same movie home that did absolutely nothing for me, and, it drives my wife crazy.
Hmm.
And you watch. I'm a person who watches people in activity. When I'm talking to somebody across, I'm always looking at the eyes. I'm looking at the face. I'm looking at body posture to kind of figure them out. And you know that with my wife, I instantly see changes based on what kind of movies it is. And like you said, it could be any kind of porn. With her, where it's me, very specific.
Now, what's different with men and women is that when a man gets turned on, he knows it,
Hmm.
and it's really all right at the surface. What's different with women is that there's lots of research that shows that women can get turned on physically and not feel turned on mentally and
Hmm.
deny being aroused. We think that that's one of the reasons why, for instance, I think sex toys and the sex industry is so good for women because it is allowing women to embrace their sexuality. Why do these women deny being turned on? Because for thousands of years they've been told women are not supposed to be sexual
Yes.
and that female sexuality, again, is dangerous. Nowadays, women, and interestingly, women who are into sex, women who enjoy sex, what do they end up getting called? They end up getting called nymphomaniacs or sex
Whores.
addicts. Yeah, whores
That's one
and
I hear
sluts.
quite often. Is
Yeah.
especially with some of our female actresses in the industry. I sit and watch them on Twitter and
Right.
listen to people batter them on Twitter. You whore,
Uh,
you you Jezebel, and it just drives me crazy. And I'm like, I figured out who this group is. This is the people I would attend church with on Sunday, and that would
right.
be in my retail store on Monday or Tuesday. They're
Right. If
sexually
any, yeah.
oppressed. These people are
Well, and
sexually
here
oppressed.
they are sexually oppressed, and they're the ones that are addicted to sex because they are addicted to being obsessed with the sex you're having.
Yes.
They're not having sex of their own, apparently, so they are so obsessed and addicted to the idea of trying to prevent you from having sex. Now, there has been very poor research of sex addiction. It's really crappy science. I'm sorry, it's junk science, and it doesn't show what they think it shows. But there has been some recent research that is really starting to empirically look at these ideas. And one of the most fascinating studies, I think, was done by a Canadian researcher named Jason Winters. And he found that the men who were most likely to self identify as sex addicts were men who had a high libido. They like sex, they enjoy sex, they wanted sex. But at the same time, they, like you, had grown up in a very strict moral religious family and background where their sexuality was identified as something that was wrong and unhealthy. So they
Yes.
had a moral conflict inside. I want sex, I like sex, sex is bad. So that sex drive became labeled something that was evil and diseased and wrong and called a sex addiction.
Yes.
But it's not. Sex
It,
is healthy. So, couples who have more sex have healthier relationships. Couples where the wife masturbates, even if the husband is not present, they have healthier relationships.
yes.
Women who enjoy sex more live longer. Men who have more sex live longer. Sex is healthy. The more sex people have, the lower their waistline. If you want to lose weight, have sex.
Have sex, and we make that statement constantly on our social medias. We say it jokingly, but really mean it.
Oh, it's
If you
real.
want to drop 10 pounds, and here is this is our diet program. Eat a healthy diet, first of all. Take some vitamins and have sex at least once a day. You
Uh-huh.
will drop
Yeah,
10 pounds in under 2 to 3 weeks.
yep. Now it's interesting that you say have sex once a day, because one of the diagnostic criteria for a good long while for sex addiction was somebody who had sex once a day, or somebody who had an orgasm once a day.
Oh
Now what
no.
I always point out is, women who are multi-orgasmic, they could have a fun night and they could blow their average for the whole month
Well,
right there with one night.
I'm afraid people are going to come in and haul me off because I've had sex at least once a day.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And public speakers that have sex do better at their public speaking. It's probably one of the reasons, apparently, that you're so smooth on the radio today. I don't know what you were doing this morning, but I can draw conclusions. But having sex once a day, there's nothing unhealthy about it. And there are, in fact, one of the reasons they had to give up that criteria is because there is research in real sex research. The
Yeah.
problem with sex addiction theory and science is they ignore all of the good science that we have about sex. So there are millions of people out there that, for instance, masturbate at night to go to sleep. And they do it every night, and it helps them sleep. And there ain't nothing wrong with it.
Now here's
It
why. Here's why they do that. Because one of the brain chemicals, correct me if I'm wrong, is serotonin. When you masturbate and ejaculate, one of the chemicals that is released is serotonin.
There are a bunch of neurochemicals that are released, and now again, there's some interesting research that shows some of the evolutionary background here. It looks like sex was a battlefield. I'm going to use the battle language in the war between sexes to control conception. And so, what I mean by that is, throughout history, men wanted to conceive with a woman. Men wanted to have sex with a woman and be able to have her get pregnant and have her kid. But women, at the same time, their bodies were trying to exert control over which man inseminated them. So, male ejaculate contains neurochemicals. It contains serotonin, like you said. It
Mm-hmm.
contains oxytocin. It contains all of these neurochemicals that make a woman feel good. And actually, they've shown that when a couple stops having unprotected sex, when they start using condoms and they were having regular unprotected sex, women's depression actually goes up. Men's semen is an antidepressant, right up there with Prozac. Maybe it even works better. And what is the reason for that? Because men and men's bodies were trying to make a woman feel good after sex. So, A, she would lay down and improve the chances of conception and fertilization, and B, she'd want more sex.
Yes, yes, I always tell women that when it comes down to sex, that we're designed for pleasure. As far as men go, we are designed for the woman's pleasure.
Right.
And I get slapped a couple of times for that, but it's the God honest truth. You
Yeah,
know,
sex is to feel good. I mean, the
yeah,
man's penis, the shape of the man's penis is actually designed to work as a suction plug to pull out the semen of any other man that might be in the woman's vagina, so that when that man, ejaculates, he's more likely again for his semen to conceive. All of these things, the reason sex feels good is so that we have more of it. And
right.
so that we have more of it and we have more babies and the human race continues. That's the way we were made. Whether a benevolent God, Mother Nature, or just really good luck happened, sex feels great, and that's a wonderful thing. It's one of the wonderful blessings of being human. And we are one of the only animal species that does that. There are very few animal species out there that have sex for pleasure the way that we do.
There is
And
only one other that and I did
yes,
research on this: bonobo chimps.
uh-huh. And they're compared to the regular chimpanzees. The bonobos are very nonviolent. They're a really neat species. So sex is not bad. Sex is a wonderful thing that we get to have in life. But do we make bad decisions about it? Sure.
Yes.
Just like we make bad decisions about every other thing in our lives. Sometimes I think my sole talent is making bad decisions. But the reality is that I make bad decisions and I accept responsibility for them. Those bad decisions are not because I'm sick. Those bad decisions are not a disease. They're not an illness. They are simply a factor of human nature. Now, sometimes do I make bad impulsive decisions around sex? Yeah, I do. And I've even had to make some changes in my life to make sure that I don't put myself in a situation where I make a decision that I'm going to regret.
Yes.
But that again is me knowing and understanding myself, me deciding what my values and what's important to me are, rather than getting into a situation where the situation overwhelms me and I make bad decisions. And that goes with sex, that goes with alcohol, it goes with business too. I don't want to walk into a business meeting unprepared without having thought about what could come up, and so I can deal with it appropriately. That
Yes.
again is just part of being a good person. It's part of being awake and being conscious.
Yeah. I mean, you put it all in great terms. I mean, that's exactly at least my feelings on it, and I think a lot of the public feelings. And one last question. Let me look
Sure.
here. You know, why did you decide to take all of this on your shoulders? Because I realized when you wrote this book, you pissed off a lot of people who are looking at using this for income.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you debunked my theory, kind of deal.
Well, and
You've
oh,
made some
and
enemies.
I've made a bunch of enemies, and um, the folks in the past who have challenged porn, and we have an unfortunate thing in our society that prohibition and alcohol, the restrictions on alcohol passed not because a majority of America thought alcohol was bad, but because a very loud, vocal, committed minority thought alcohol was bad, and everybody who liked alcohol kept their mouth shut, because if they said they liked alcohol, they were called evil and immoral.
Oh
The
yeah,
same thing is happening today with
I've
sex
got
and porn.
prohibition posters in my office.
Yeah, the people, exactly, and the same thing is happening today. The people who are saying that porn is unhealthy are, they've made all the millions, the majority of men out there who have seen pornography, they make them afraid to admit that they've seen pornography and like pornography, because if they do, then we're going to get painted with an evil brush. Since I have been challenging sex addiction, I've been told I must be a sex addict. If I don't believe in it, then I must be one. I must be in denial. It's a strange kind of argument. And these people are coming after me. I didn't know that was going to happen when I started doing this. Why did I take it on? Because it absolutely infuriates me to see people attacking other people for A, things that they don't understand, B, putting their values on others, and C, just like being gay or lesbian is not unhealthy, or the relationship, or caused by a disease. Simply liking more sex than somebody else, or liking kinky or alternative sex, is not a disease either. It shouldn't be used as something to shame people. And that's what these folks are doing, and I don't
Yes.
like it. It makes me sick, it makes me angry, and there are lots of folks out there that have been hurt by these people, and I'm hearing more and more from them. People who've been shamed by liking sex and then being told, oh, you're a sex addict. And that's not just by their
Well,
by
and
their
it's
spouse,
actually
but
doing destructive damage to their psyche.
it is hurting people. And I tell one story of a young man who had serious alcohol problems, and he got admitted to one of these high dollar treatment facilities in Arizona. Now he was there for alcohol problems, but they said, wow, you've got sex problems too. You're a sex addict. You must have been sexually abused as a kid. And the guy called up his mom and said, Mom, was I ever sexually abused?
Yeah, was
And
I
she
ever
goes,
molested?
Yeah, and she goes, "No, I don't think so." And he says, "Well, they're telling me I must have been because I'm a sex addict." Well, very sadly, this guy died. He died from his alcoholism, which again is another point. Alcoholism you can die from. Ain't nobody in the history of the world ever died from either having too much sex or not getting to have sex when they wanted to.
Having sex in a
Alcohol
bad
and
place
that
has killed people. Let's get that straight. Having sex in a bad place does kill people. And that's a bad decision during sex. Don't have sex in the middle of an interstate during rush hour. Not a good idea.
absolutely, absolutely, or the 50-yard line during the
Yes.
Super Bowl. But
Yes.
But just having too much sex is not unhealthy. But having too much alcohol can kill you.
Yes.
And if you take an alcoholic and you take away the alcohol, they can go into withdrawals and die. Somebody who's having sex every day and they stop having sex, they're not going to die.
They're
So,
awful horny, but they're not going to
but
die.
but this young man died. Now the woman walked up. His mother walked up to me a few months ago as I was doing a presentation, and she told me the story. And she said, for the past 10 years, I have been horribly sad and afraid that my son died because of me. She said, I'm worried that maybe he was sexually abused and I didn't know it and I didn't stop it. And
Oh.
he ended up as a sex addict and it was
Oh.
my fault. And she said, thank you for doing this presentation. She said, thanks for writing this book because that now she had some peace. Now she knew that these people who were throwing this label of sex addiction at her son were being unethical and they were just selling snake oil.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they hurt
and let's
people and
make
they
this
hurt
point.
her in the process.
Let's make this point to the fans that are listening. Um, you know, sex is good in general. Like I said, unless you make bad decisions, which affect your health, your well-being, and the people around you. The best point I think we've said here is that if somebody's saying you're this and that, they might be implying a level of control on you, and watch out. Just wake up a little bit. Uh, you know,
Hmm.
don't let these people who have an agenda, who want to make money off of you, make you afraid to enjoy your life. Period. Because sex is part of life, and it just the doctor says it's made him angry. This makes everybody in our industry angry because we're all labeled addicts automatically just because
Yeah.
I own a company, or I work for a company. I know a lady who works on an assembly line for dildos, handles dildos all day long, plays with dick all day long. That's what she does. She takes them off, the assembly line, wraps them. You know, is she a sex addict? Or is she just doing a job that pays really well? And I asked her the other day when we bumped into each other, and I said, look, you handle dick all day long. Do you consider yourself being sexually addicted? Do they turn you on all day long? She goes, it's a piece of rubber in a box.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I said, when you go home, do you have good sex? She goes, yes, I do. Me and my husband have great sex, and so now if she was making the bad decision and actually using the product and things like that, she's going to get fired in the workplace because she did it in the workplace. That's a bad decision. And
Yeah.
that's what we really need to focus on is pay attention to your decisions. Even though you make a bad decision doesn't make you a sex addict. It makes you a bad decision maker. Do you
Yeah,
not agree?
exactly. I think that's very well said.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, this is one of our biggest peeves in our industry is people, oh, you're a sex addict, you're a prostitute, you're this, you're that. I mean, people look at me like I'm a depraved child molester because I own a sex toy company.
Yeah. Yeah. I if it well, I mean, they look at me as a depraved person because I write books about sex,
Yeah.
and
And
because I admit to enjoying sex.
yeah. And here's the facts. I'm a married man. I have children. I am a monogamous man. Okay. It's only between me and my wife. And, if we want to bring some toys and test drive them to write a review about them, that's up to us. I don't do anything illegal. I don't do anything involving children. A matter of fact, we completely discourage children from viewing or seeing or hearing or touching or being in or around any of our products because they're not mature enough to understand what they're for and why they're used for, and should not be exposed to that until they are 18 or older. And we say that based on maturity.
Yep.
We have a very hard stance on this, and yet we get labeled. We
Right.
get hated. Now, Dr. Lay, I also understand, since you've written this book, and I'm going to use the word hated because I've read about this, I've heard about this over and over and over. You've actually had your life threatened over bringing this to the light.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had people, threaten me, call me evil. I've had people, go after me and try and find dirt on me and my family. They called me and my family sex addicts. I've even been threatened with legal action,
By
by
somebody really
because
famous, I understand.
I'm sorry, say that again.
By a very famous person, I understand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The truth is out there. Let me just say that. Every time I get interviewed on in the media about sex addiction, they oftentimes run pictures of some of these famous celebrity sex addicts. Actors and golf stars and such. And one of the attorneys of these guys wrote me and said, "Look, you got to stop using our client's name." And I said, "Well, I'm not using your client's name. The newspapers are. If you got a problem with it, talk to them."
Yeah,
But
talk to
it's
CNN.
interesting because, yeah, exactly. It's fine for these guys when they get in trouble to come out and say that they're a sex addict. But then when I put out a book saying there's no such thing as sex addiction, they don't want their name associated with that. Isn't that interesting?
Yes. Oh, there's no disease. I screwed up. You'd have to
That's right.
admit you did something wrong.
I made a bad decision.
Yeah.
One of the stories I tell in the book that I really love, and I think it's different. I argue obviously a couple of things. I say sex addiction is, these folks moralizing and trying to control your sex, but it's also something else that's interesting. It is people using it as an excuse to get out of trouble, and these men who are doing what men have done for thousands of years, then they get in trouble and they say they're a sex addict. But Elliot
Well, and that's
Spitzer
a
was
get
the
out of
governor of New.
free jail card because you
Yeah.
go
Oh,
to you
absolutely.
go to the 12-step program where they sprinkle some fairy dust on you and you're cured.
That's right. Elliot Spitzer was the governor of New York, and he's not anymore. He got in trouble for a prostitute scandal, and during the scandal, his advisors went to him and said, Elliot, we want you to come out and say you're a sex addict, and you'll go into sex addiction treatment, and these problems will go away. And Spitzer said no. He said, I've always, throughout my career, expected people to be responsible who worked for me, and I can do no less. Now, I might not agree with the bad decisions he made in his marriage and in his personal life, but I admire that decision. He took responsibility for his mistakes and he owned them. And now he's a commentator on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess that works.
Well,
I think that's
and
pretty
here's the
amazing.
thing is sex addiction, and you put it very squarely, is a way of sweeping indiscretions under the rug
Yeah.
for famous people, for people in public positions. It's a great way for them to say, I'm an addict, I couldn't control myself. When the reality is, you were in full control. You made bad, poor ass decisions. You hurt your family, and now you're using a scapegoat.
Right. It's a way for us to say the problem is the sex, not the person.
Yes.
You mentioned Tiger Woods a minute ago, and actually, since I published the book, a new biography of Woods has come out by one of his former coaches, and that coach says, Woods was being selfish and egotistical and mean in lots of ways to people around him, not just in sex. Sex was just one of the ways he was acting like a selfish jerk. So
Well,
the problem
he
was
was
not.
outletting his celebrity, as we call it.
Yeah.
We have adult stars who get the same way as Tiger Woods does. They get a huge head, and they forget about all the people that helped them get to where they are, making the money they make. And actually, we've had an adult star go in for sex addiction in our industry, and I can't mention names because, like I said, I don't want the lawsuit. But
Mhm.
you're in porn and you go get treated for sex addiction and expect to come back into porn
Yeah.
3 months later. It was because they got a big head. They made some bad decisions, slept with some people they shouldn't have, got in trouble with whoever they were with, and they were trying to sweep it under. I mean, it happens in every industry, every government. I mean, I can think of governors, mayors, presidents,
Mhm.
presidents of the United States.
Yeah,
Bill
but things
Clinton.
have changed, you know. Yeah, Jack Kennedy had lots of sex in the White House.
Oh, yes.
Clinton had a couple of blowjobs.
Yeah.
Jack Kennedy, the media ignored it. Clinton, he got impeached,
Yeah.
and again,
Well, look at
what this
Jefferson.
is,
This isn't just one
yeah,
president.
right.
This isn't just two. Look at even Thomas Jefferson, founding father.
Well, and look at Newt Gingrich,
Yeah.
who, was one of the people leading the impeachment at the same time as he was cheating on his wife,
Yeah.
and had cheated on multiple wives, and wanted to have an open marriage so he could have more sex.
Yeah.
Again, what has changed is the way society is viewing sex, and sex addiction is just an easy out. It's a way to say the problem is in the sex, not the person.
Well,
But
and this
really,
hasn't
we need
existed
to
for a
hold
long
people
time
responsible
either.
for their behaviors.
The term sex addiction is actually fairly new. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
it's got some age on it.
it's really just since the early 1980s, at the same time that AIDS and HIV came in,
When
which is also
sex
part of my
became
argument that
scary.
when sex became not only scary but could kill you,
Yes.
and particularly unrestrained male sexuality. Bisexual men and homosexual men who liked sex too much were now not just being immoral, they were spreading deadly disease.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, what do we got? We got sex is a disease.
Yes.
So,
Well, Dr. Lay, it has been an absolute pleasure. We're running out of time here on this show, but I
sure.
wanted to thank you for coming on. And, I'd like to invite you back in the future because, one of my closing thoughts is if these researchers who have come up with sex addiction, use sex addiction, would do half the research that the porn industry has done, they would realize there's no such thing.
Yeah.
And our
Well,
research, I mean, we don't need laboratories. We don't need a clinical psychologist's office. What we do is we invite people in to come play with us. And we watch.
right.
We watch the human being. And I've never had somebody that I sent DVDs to or a sex toy, a masturbation toy, go crazy. I've never seen it. Never had them go psycho. You know, and like I said, it's the very very few rare cases where people make bad decisions. They push the wife and kids to the side and tend to lock themselves in a dark basement while masturbating or something. Bad decision. It's not an addiction. Uh,
Yep.
I'm a smoker. I used to have an alcohol problem. I did not have to go to a 12-step program to realize that I was flushing my wife and kids down the toilet and to stop drinking. It came to a day where I came to a realization goes, I can't do this anymore. You know, yeah, it sucked. And I'm sure if I would have been more of an alcoholic, that I would have needed to seek treatment to come off of it.
Hmm.
Because then they can help you with the drugs, they can help you with the mental counseling. There's no coming off of sex, ladies and gentlemen. You are pre-programmed to have a sexual nature. Do you not agree?
Yeah. Oh, sex is part of being human, and it's maybe even one of the best parts of being human.
It is
So,
one of the best because
yep.
that's where we build close bonds with the people who matter the most. Is through sex. I mean, look at husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend relationships. That's how we build that trust.
Yep.
It is
Hey,
through
Justin,
that
I find
contact.
that I'm actually out of time now as well.
Yes, sir.
Um, but I do look forward to coming back on your show. And you know, my first book is about the cuckold and hot wife phenomenon.
Yes.
And you know, cuckold porn is now the second most popular porn on the internet. It's a big phenomenon, and I'd love to chat with you and your listeners about what's behind that, why it's
We
happening.
we're definitely happy to have you. And again, this is Dr. Lay. Now, Dr. Lay, your book is available on Amazon.com, right?
It is. It
Okay.
is. You can go to Amazon. You can also just go to drdavidlay.com. The last name, even though it sounds like Lay, as in sex, it's spelled Ley.
Ley.
Um, yep. So
Well,
Dr.
Dr. Lay,
David.
I'll let you run, and I know you got patients to get to, so we appreciate the time that you've spent with us. I'm going to tell everybody a little bit more about your book, and I want to wish you the best in all your ventures. And like I said, if you have any new information sprout up or anything, feel free to contact us. We'll be happy to have you on the air. That was Dr. David Lay. I am just incredible. I'll be back with you here in just a moment. Okay,
Hey,
Dr.
thanks.
Lay.